Good evening, ladies as well as gentlemen. Papa Boris here doing something I haven't done in a long time. This is going to be a video session report of a game of Mage Knight with the Lost Legion expansion that was played on the BoardGameGeek forums. I am using the Vassal Mage Knight Lost Legion module made by the inimitable Ben Kyo. So great thanks go out to him because without his work this would be absolutely impossible to do. Anyway, this game was moderated by a gentleman named Jack, who lives in Austria. My opponents were Josiah, a fellow from, I believe, Washington, Goldyx, a very kind man, Pawel, a man from Poland, Seppel, a man from Germany, and then, of course, myself. There were several parameters that we were using in this game, so I want to explain what those were before we get started. I'm actually going to show you what those were in the rules. We were using Envy and Pity and magical seals. Basically, we all wanted to try these out and see how they worked. Spoiler alert, these variants suck, but I'm really glad that we played with them in this game. They added some comedy, and you know, without trying it, we wouldn't have known how we liked it. So Envy and Pity is really straightforward. At the end of the day, whoever has the most fame adds a wound to his deck. At the end of each night, whoever has the least fame removes a wound from their deck. This had pretty much no impact on the game. Magical seals had a pretty significant impact. So what you do is you pick one of each of the four basic colors, red, green, blue, and white, and you place it at random on the 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th levels, which will look like this. We had white, green, red, and blue. Basically, nobody can reach that level until somebody pays a mana of the appropriate color. So to get rid of this seal and allow everybody to get to the 3rd level, somebody would have to pay a white mana during their turns. Basically, I'll just give us a little, very, very mild spoiler, and I think you can probably tell this from common sense anyway. The 3rd level one matters a lot, because it's kind of hard to come up with a spare mana when you're like level 1 or 2. But the other ones are pretty immaterial, so all in all, this was, I thought, a pretty dumb variant. But anyway, you'll see it adds a lot of comedy to the game. So let's go ahead and get into the game itself. Josiah was rolled randomly as the first hero picker, and he selected Goldyx. I passed. Seppel passed, and then Pawel actually bid 1 fame to take Goldyx. The reason for this that Pawel gave is that we were playing with the variant that rewarded, you know, being the player who was further behind, so he figured he'd pay a fame and, you know, be a little bit behind to have his favorite hero, Goldyx, who had been doing very well in the league that we were playing in. Nobody else was thinking along Pawel's lines, so Pawel got to have Goldyx for 1 fame. Okay, next up, Josiah picked Wolfhawk, who is the worst character in the game, so nobody else bid for her, and he got her. It was my turn to pick next. I grabbed Arythea. Now, the reason that I took Arythea was I think she's actually the best hero under the parameters that we were playing. This was actually, I should have said up front, a Dungeon Lords game. And we had these variants that, you know, gave wounds to the best player, and you had to pay mana to break past seals. Well, Arythea is the best character in the game of obtaining a variety of mana. She also is the best character in the game for dealing with wounds, and she's a really, really good combatant in dungeons without relying on units, because I think battle versatility is the best basic card in the game, and it just gives you some amazing flexibility in going into combat. So I was kind of surprised that nobody picked her earlier on. Seppel did not bid for Arythea. He was last to pick. He chose Tovak, his favorite hero. So my favorite hero, Norwis, alas, was not present in this game. You can go sit in the corner, Norwis. Okay, so the selection order of tactics was actually this, because Pawel, who picked Goldyx, he was actually the last hero picker originally. So he actually picked tactics first, and then Tovak would pick tactics, and then finally Arythea, and then Josiah, who ended up with the worst character, he was actually rolled as the first hero picker, so Wolfhawk picked tactics last. Let's go ahead now and check out what the offers were, and actually get our tactics selected as I move everybody down. So now that we've picked heroes, here was the game board. We started out with a pretty rough opening, actually, in my opinion. So there's a dungeon here, a regular one. If you've never played Dungeon Lords before, basically a bonus dungeon gets added next to every village, and a bonus tomb gets added next to every monastery. These work just like regular dungeons and tombs do, so that there's just a lot more fighting in the game. So there was a dungeon here because of this village, and then there was a tomb here because of this monastery. So we have a lot of dungeons actually out front, but dungeons are pretty difficult for level 1 characters. What level 1 characters really want is a nice rampaging orc to kill. or preferably maybe a wizard tower to take out, even though that's difficult. The reward, which is a spell, is quite huge. Well, our first orc was a stone thrower, which is 4 fame, but very difficult to kill. And then the diggers, of course, here kind of suck. They're easy to kill, but they're only 2 fame, so you don't level up from killing one of them. So it's a bit of a tough start here, honestly. We had a pretty good source. Granted, 2 of the dice were black, but at least the other 4 were a variety of colors. And let's also take a look at the cards. The unit offer is pretty solid. Scouts are from Lost Legion. These are one of my favorite units from the expansion. I like them a lot. Their movement, they can peek at a token, and either you can avoid the fight if it's too hard, or if you go ahead and fight the thing that you peek at, you get a bonus fame. And then, of course, the siege attack is sometimes very useful for because sometimes 1 extra ranged attack is all you need. Familiars, I think everyone agrees, are grotesquely overpowered, and so that was here. We had Guardian Golems, which are very good. The Swordsmen, I think, are junk, and the Guardsmen, I think, are junk too, but the Crossbowmen were here as well if anyone was actually able to recruit them, so there were some decent units. The advanced actions were spectacular. These are, 3 really, really good advanced actions. I think probably of these, Ice Bolt is the best, just because elemental damage is so rare, and it can also do that or give you mana. Mana Storm is probably second best, just because it gives you tons of mana, and then Ambush is a really flexible card that's just terrific. You can get movement, attack, and or block. So lots of great stuff here. We even had a pretty good spell offer, although Space Bending is kind of marginal. Charm is a pretty good spell. It's from Lost Legion. I'll blow it up for you so you can read it if you haven't seen it before. It's very, very good. And then Snowstorm is just very simple but extremely strong. So we had some good offers, but a pretty difficult board. Okay, let me actually, before I forget, give Goldyx a fame penalty. He was starting at -1 because Pawel had bid 1 fame to choose him. So Pawel was the first tactics picker, and he decided to grab Mana Steal. Now, this I find, it was hard to say without seeing what Pawel's opening hand was. In general, I'm actually not a big fan of taking Mana Steal. It feels really good to get extra mana, but I find that you generally want to go earlier in a 4-player game. So Pawel was quite generous, taking this white die, but allowing the rest of us to have a chance at going first. And in fact, Tovak, who was the second tactics picker, jumped all over this. He grabbed Early Bird. Then it was Arythea's turn to select. So I actually know what my hand was. Let me go ahead and show it to you. This was my opening hand. It was pretty good. As you can see here, I have tons of movement, and Arythea's basic card from Lost Legion, Mana Pool, which is fantastic. It makes it so that basically black dice in the source or your own private reserve of whatever mana you want. So it was a pretty decent hand. You might think movement, maybe having this much movement isn't that great, but there's not much to do really, so movement is kind of what you want. Now, normally what I would do in a situation like this is I would actually take Rethink, just because it's the earliest tactic, but here I didn't really have any particular thing I wanted to do. What I was probably going to end up doing is moving somewhere, and then I'd have a couple of cards left in hand, which made planning an interesting choice. So I decided to actually grab planning. This, violates my rule of thumb of always go as early as you can, but I really didn't see any good early objectives to take. I don't like going to dungeons early on, because if you don't draw the right cards, you're screwed. And in my particular case, with 2 swiftnesses, let me show you my hand again. I mean, it was a tough choice. With 2 swiftnesses and Mana Pool, I mean, I could take out a dungeon if I can play Mana Pool and pull and get 2 white mana. 2 swiftnesses is ranged attack 6. That'll kill, 62.5% of random brown enemies. The problem with that is that if I get like a Crypt Worm or something, I'm just going to take a ton of wounds and then have a difficult time killing it. The other problem is this source, with just this gold die here, Tovak on his first turn is almost certainly going to take this gold die. So if he re-rolls it and it's not white or gold, then I can't play Mana Pool, then I can't use both of my swiftnesses, then I can't take out a dungeon. Now I'm stuck sitting on a dungeon with no contingency plan. So I decided to grab planning, but it was a tough choice. I could, if I wanted to, have taken Rethink and gotten rid of 1 of my movement cards and tried to get something else, but I chose planning to go for the slow game. Wolfhawk grabbed Rethink, discarded some cards, and we were off to the races. So let's go ahead and return all the tactics and start the game. So Tovak was up first. He made the following moves. Very simple. He first drew a card with Tranquility. Now, without seeing Tovak's hand, of course, I'm never going to be quite sure, if anyone made a mistake or not. In general, while you're watching this video, if I say someone made a mistake or should have done something differently, it's just my personal opinion. It is not necessarily carved in stone truth. But in general, I think it's a mistake to play Tranquility for a card because you're losing the potential of using that card for a move, an attack, a block, or an influence. So you're losing some card potential to cycle. In Mage Knight, cycling your deck is not good like it is in most deck building style card games. So I like to hang on to it and use it for a heal or to use it to save up before a big battle. But anyway, he did it, and then he just played Instinct, using, of course, the gold die for 4 move. If you haven't seen it before, this is Instinct, Tovak's new basic card from Lost Legion. It replaces Improvisation. It basically makes it so that it's 2 of anything or 4 of anything if you power it up with mana. With that 4 move, he went ahead and moved to the dungeon. So let's put Tovak's figure on here. What do I use these circles for? I guess just for picking tactics, so you can go swim in the lake for now, Tovak. He moved to the dungeon, and then he discarded Promise. He actually just straight up discarded this card. And in general, I'm not a fan of doing what Tovak was doing here. Basically, by discarding Promise, he indicates that he's sort of going all in on this dungeon. He's going to sit here until he has a good hand for taking out the dungeon. Now, the reward for a dungeon is great. You level up and you get an artifact, but I don't like going all in the first round on an objective, no matter how juicy that objective is, because I find that if you do that, you end up out of position compared to someone else who traveled up the map and maybe took out something less good, but put himself in better position to explore and enter new vistas. So I don't like this strategy, but again, that's just my own personal opinion. All right, so after his turn, he re-rolled the gold die quite helpfully for everyone to black. So we were now playing with a half-dead source right off the bat, which is, that's life. I've actually forgot to put something out here. There was an altar right here. This was the blue mana altar. So seeing altars early on can be very interesting because if you can actually get the 3 mana, you can get a ton of fame. Okay, Wolfhawk was up next. She had a similar plan to Tovak. She was also going to take out a dungeon. She went to this dungeon, though, the one that's harder to get to. And the way that she did that is by having her thing not set up accurately. All right, good job, Boris. Good job. Give me a moment, folks. There we go. She played March. She played Swiftness. She also actually played Concentration, Sideways, and Threaten sideways for a total of 6 movement. That was how she got to this dungeon in the Wasteland. Which you might think is kind of weird. Why did she do that? Well, what she was thinking here is her last card was Crystallize. She actually crystallized, paying a blue die to use the stronger effect of Crystallize and get any crystal she wanted, which was a red crystal that she chose. So she played out her whole hand, and in doing so, she ended up with a crystal, and she was on the dungeon. Now, this move I like more than Tovak's opening move because at least she's a little bit farther up the map, and if she doesn't get good cards for killing the dungeon, she might get good cards for killing this stone thrower, which would give her a level up. Tovak instead is next to this digger, which is a less good place to be. Wolfhawk re-rolled the blue die better than Tovak re-rolled his die. She gave us a green die to use in the future, and that was her turn. Okay, so I was last to go because I picked the planning tactic. Goldyx, who had chosen Mana Steel, was up next. So let's actually give him his white die. Let's remember that he has it for use. And here's what he decided to do. Goldyx went with Stamina, and then he jaunted to the east. Then he played Crystal Joy, which is Goldyx's new advanced card from Lost Legion. It's kind of like Crystallize, except that you can discard cards to keep it in your hand, and if you're using the advanced effect, you can actually discard a wound to take it back to your hand. And that was actually what Goldyx did. So after playing Crystal Joy with a red die to get a red crystal, he actually discarded Rage to keep the Crystal Joy in his hand. And then he just sat here. So I'm guessing Goldyx didn't have a lot of movement, because if he had more movement, he would have gone to this village in the swamp. Or perhaps he just really wanted to use Crystal Joy. I know that Pawel, the person playing Goldyx, really loves this card and likes to use it as much as possible. You can get a lot of crystals out of it, but it costs you quite a bit of time and other resources. So in general, I don't like to do it unless I have really nothing else to do. So he kept the Crystal Joy in his hand. He re-rolled the red die into another green die, so we now had 2 green dice, 3 black dice, and then Pawel was holding onto this white die that he'd stolen. So it wasn't a really great source. We're like less than a turn into the round, and the source already sucks. That just seems to be my curse in playing this game, is I always end up with terrible sources. Okay, so here was my hand, and in this situation, basically, if there had been no green and no blue mana in the source, I would have been really kind of screwed. Luckily, there was green mana, so I played March for 4 movement using a green die. I also played Stamina for 2 movement, and I used one of my Swiftnesses for 2 more movement. So this is actually a total of 8 movement, which is a bit overkill. I only needed 7 to go east into this village in the swamp. So my plan here was to angle in for this monastery and try to recruit a unit there and then burn it to get the artifact. Good, just basic tip for new players. When you first learn the rules, it might look like burning monasteries is, bad because you get that -3 reputation penalty, but it's what you gotta do because killing a random purple enemy to get an artifact is an amazing bonus. The green die got re-rolled into a blue one, and I was left with Swiftness and Mana Pull in my hand. Okay, that was the end of round 1, turn 1. Back around to Tovak. Okay, so Tovak here had a pretty underwhelming turn. He just discarded Stamina and Threaten. So like I said, he was going all in on this dungeon, and I'm just not a big fan of that move. I mean, I would have, if I were him, like, fought these diggers or moved to this blue altar or something, but just sitting here, I'm not a big fan of that particular approach, although I'm sure, somebody somewhere has done it and had great success with it. Anyway, that was his whole turn. Wolfhawk deemed her hand unworthy of fighting a stone thrower, so she elected to, of going into the dungeon, so she elected to fight the stone thrower. And she fought the stone thrower as follows. She played Tirelessness, which is Wolfhawk's advanced version of Stamina, and Stamina for 5 move. This reduced the orc stone thrower's attack by 5. That little boulder to the right means that the enemy is cumbersome. It means that you can play movement to reduce its attack. So the orc was left with just 2 attack, and that dealt a wound to Wolfhawk. Now you might wonder, Boris, why didn't Wolfhawk use a blue die to power up one of these and not take any damage? The reason is Josiah actually made a blunder. He simply did not realize that there was a blue die in the source due to errant bookkeeping, I should say. So he got a wound for his troubles, and that, is a big deal, taking an unnecessary wound, but he at least didn't take more damage. And then to actually kill the stone thrower, he played 3 cards, Rage, and then Promise, and Mana Draw Sideways. Now, if there had been a red die in the source, he could have actually just powered up Rage and killed the stone thrower with that. So there's a little bit of bad luck on Josiah's part that the source wasn't more in his favor, and that he missed that there was a source die here that he actually could use. In any case, he played out his hand of 5 cards, was left with the wound, and at this point, Wolfhawk leveled up. So for her level up skills, Wolfhawk drew On Her Own, which is the worst skill in the game, and then Deadly Aim, which is one of the best skills, if not the best combat skills in the game. And so Wolfhawk obviously chose Deadly Skill and sent On Her Own to the common offer, which we'll put off to the side somewhere. Wolfhawk, in my opinion, is just the worst character in all of Mage Knight, and part of the reason for that is that if you don't get one of her 2 good skills, which is Deadly Aim and Know Your Prey, then you just are screwed, because her skills are also mediocre. Luckily for Josiah here, he did get one of Wolfhawk's better skills, which is one of the best skills in the game. What this does is it adds 1 to a card for siege or ranged attack, or 2 combat damage to a card used for regular attack. So it's extremely flexible because it can be used both in ranged combat and regular combat. Compared to other combat skills, you need to play a card to activate it, but it's very rare that you're going to use do a combat doing only units. So realistically, it's just better than most combat skills. Okay, so that was Wolfhawk's turn. She chose Deadly Aim. She also got to, of course, choose a card from this offer. And I think, in my personal opinion, Wolfhawk made the wrong choice. Wolfhawk elected to take Mana Storm here, but I really think Ice Bolt's the best one. You need combat, and this provides elemental attack, which is incredibly rare. It's just Ice Bolt, Firebolt, and Ritual Attack that give elemental damage among the advanced actions, and of course Ritual Attack is total garbage. So Mana Storm is a great card for mana, but I find that it's just better to take combat like Ice Bolt if you can. Anyway, Josiah elected Mana Storm with Wolfhawk, which is rough in this source to actually pull it off, but that was what he chose. And let's also give Wolfhawk her hard-earned 4 fame and +1 reputation. And that was her turn. So pretty eventful turn for Wolfhawk. Next up was Goldyx. So Goldyx here began a sequence of moves that I found incredibly strange. So this is not, I don't know what his hand was, but whatever his hand was, I know that I definitely would not have done this. He played March, he played Threaten, and he played Swiftness for 5 move. That was enough to move to the altar in the forest, provoking the diggers, and taking 2 wounds. The weird part is, at this point, Goldyx didn't fight the diggers, he just took the pain, and he then played Crystal Joy with the blue die to gain a blue crystal. At the end of his turn, he discarded one of his wounds to keep Crystal Joy in his hand. So the diggers dealt him 2 wounds. He was able to get rid of one of them with Crystal Joy, but he didn't actually fight the diggers or do anything about them. He just went to the blue altar. So now he had 1 blue crystal, a stolen white die, and if he got mana draw, he could use the stolen white die to play mana draw for 2 blue tokens, and then use this blue crystal in order to in order to finish off the altar and get 7 fame, which is decent, but very strange move here, just taking damage and then not doing anything about it. So he re-rolled the blue die into, of course, a black one, so this source was just going nowhere fast. Here's where it was good to be Arythea. I mentioned before that Arythea is the most flexible with mana. These black dice don't bother me as much because I know that at any time I can play Mana Pull and use one of these black dice for whatever color I want, which is great. I do need to, of course, give Goldyx a wound because he was only able to get rid of one of the wounds via Crystal Joy. So he's holding on to that. Okay. Next up was me. And at this point, let me show you my hand. So I had redrawn, and my hand was Battle Versatility and Rage, Determination, and Swiftness and Mana Pull. So I am itching for a fight here, just dying for a fight, which is a problem because I don't want to use these cards fighting the diggers, especially because the diggers impede the movement of Tovak and Goldyx, and it's just not worth it. What I want to do is like burn down this monastery, but the problem is that if I burn down the monastery, I can't recruit units there. In order to recruit, I need to play Influence, and Influence is the one thing this hand doesn't have. So it was all around an awkward hand. For this reason, I decided to plunder the village. Again, when I first learned Mage Knight, I was like, plundering villages, that's mean. But even though it's a little bit mean thematically, it's something you really should do in most cases. So I drew 2 extra cards. I got Stamina, and I got Concentration. So this was, needless to say, pretty awkward, except I actually built my deck wrong. Sorry. So we actually had Promise here. Let me put Concentration back in there. So I actually drew Stamina and Promise. If I had drawn Concentration, that would have been really bad. Promise was really good. I needed some sort of influence, and I got it, thankfully, here. So what I did after plundering the village was I played Stamina to get to the monastery. I needed just 2 movement for that. And I played Promise, which there's no white dice in the source, so there's just 2 influence. And then I used Rage and Determination to hire the scouts. So I would have loved to get the magic familiars, but there was just no way for me to get up to 6 influence without spending too many resources. So I could have like basically dumped, 2 more cards here, Battle Versatility and Swiftness, to get 6 influence and then play Mana Pull to use a black die to give the familiars a crystal. That would have been a little bit excessive, and it would have left me without any means of taking out the monastery. So with Mana Pull, Battle Versatility, and Swiftness, I had a decent, opportunity for taking the monastery out on my next turn. And the scouts are, like I said, a pretty good unit, so I didn't mind getting them. Let's go ahead and discard these cards. And give myself my scouts. Okay, so that was my turn. Pretty good one. Now I lost a reputation, but I'm ready to burn the monastery on my next turn. I did, in fact, draw a pretty good hand for that with Concentration and Crystallize, so I am definitely ready to burn at this point. Okay, so that was it for turn 2. Turn 3, Tovak had an epic play. He discarded stamina. Oh god. I guess I messed up setting up the deck a little bit. Let's just go ahead and discard it. Yay! And then we'll sort out his hand later. So he just discarded stamina and that was it. He, again, is just sitting here until he gets a good hand for the dungeon. The other problem is the source is pretty crappy, so perhaps he was waiting hoping somebody would improve the source. But that seems unlikely, because unless Arythea plays Mana Pull, or somebody sets one of these dice, black dice, to a different color using Mana Draw, it's going to be really, really difficult for the source to improve. So Tovak was in a bit of a rough spot. He's out of position, he's committed to this dungeon plan, and he can't go in there yet. Okay, Wolfhawk was up. Without white mana in the source, she could not activate the ability of Mana Storm that would re-roll the source dice, so she had a pretty tame turn. What she did here is she played Mana Storm to get a green crystal, and then she re-rolled this die to blue, which is a little bit disconcerting, of course, because it made it easier for Goldyx to conquer this blue altar. That was a color we did not really want anyone to be rolling in the source. And that was it for her turn. Goldyx was up. He played Tranquility. Oh, I actually have someone with like the correct cards to trash the wound remaining in his hand. He then played Mana Draw using the stolen die to set one of the black dice blue. This gave him 2 blue tokens, which with the blue die that was already in the source allowed him to complete the altar. So the altar got completed. And now we got to award some prizes. Goldyx, who started at -1 fame, collected 7 fame for the altar, putting him up to 6 and giving him the lead. He also got a level up. His choices were potion making and red crystal craft. He decided to put red crystal craft in the offer to keep potion making because he planned to take more wounds from these diggers. Quite a lot, it turned out. So he was pretty lucky to draw potion making for that reason. For his level up, advanced action, he actually chose the new one that came up in the offer, Learning. Now, Learning, I'm not a big fan of this one. In general, I think that Influence is the weakest thing to get. And what this lets you do is spend Influence to collect an advanced action from the offer. Now, the problem with this is, of course, it's great early in the game to get Learning because it increases your number of advanced actions. But unlike something like, say, Training, you've got to spend quite a large amount of influence and resources in order to collect the advanced action. For training, you just got to throw away one of your cards. For learning, you got to pay influence, which requires you to spend probably more than one other card and maybe some mana to get. So I'm not a big fan of this, especially with Ice Bolt sitting here. Oh my god, Ice Bolt is so good. And Ambush. I would take either one of these over Learning in a heartbeat. Again, you know, just my opinion. I think this was a mistake. I think that either of the other cards would have been better than Learning for Goldyx to grab. But Learning is what he chose. Okay, so that was it for his level up. He re-rolled the white die that he had mana stolen into red, finally sending it back to the source, and he rolled the blue die gold. So we actually had a decent source for once in our lives. Let's go ahead and get rid of Tranquility and Mana Draw. Crystal Joy is still sitting in Goldyx's hand. And we move on to Wolfhawk. I beg your pardon, Wolfhawk already had her turn. We move on to me. Yes. So here was my hand. I needed to basically burn this monastery. The only question I had was, is it worth it to use the scouts to peek at the unit that is in there? And I decided not to do that. The reason is that with this gold die in the source, I can actually play concentration on swiftness for 5 ranged attack. I could play Mana Pull to use a black die for red mana to play Battle Versatility for 3 more ranged attack. I actually had 8 ranged attack available to me, which will kill anything in the purple pool. So I would like to not have to do that, but I could, with these 4 cards, kill literally any purple monster I would find. So for me, spending scouts to get an extra fame was not smart because I'd much rather use them for 2 movement later on. So I went ahead and burned the monastery, losing 3 reputation in the process. Mwah, mwah, mwah. So I am not popular with the locals at this point in ye old slightest. The purple enemy that I fought was ice mages, which is totally fine. They're kind of annoying later in the game because of their high armor, but when you're just fighting them in a monastery, they're really great. So I killed these guys easily. Oh, begging your pardon. I actually messed up my deck ordering here. Before going into the monastery, I did play March for 2 movement to explore the tile next to me. Thank you. So what I found was this tile. And this is a pretty crappy tile. The maze is decent, but it requires a lot of movement to get to. And then there's a keep out here. But there's nothing immediately in my vicinity that I can use. Now, because we're playing Dungeon Lords and there's a village here, I had to place a secret dungeon in this location. And I decided to put the dungeon right here. I'm going to mark that with a gold token to indicate that there's a secret dungeon there. The reason I put that farther away from me is I knew there was going to be no chance of me to take the dungeon this round. That's just too many resources. So I wanted to move as close as possible into the tile right here to see what was in the keep while it was still day, and then maybe take the dungeon at the beginning of the next night. So that was why I put the dungeon here rather than here. Okay, but anyway, back to the fight. I faced the ice mages and I killed them very easily, so we played concentration powered by the gold die on swiftness for 5 ranged attack, and then I played battle versatility for 1 ranged attack. So you can see Arythea, like, her advantage when it comes to combat early in the game is not insignificant. She had a level of security going into this monastery fight that no other hero could have, and she was able to kill the ice mages with aplomb and still hang on to this mana pool, actually. So that was great. Somehow oh my god, you know what I forgot? I forgot that I had planning. So I was actually holding a 6-card hand that had March and Crystallize. There we go. That's why my deck was out of order. Anyway, so I killed the ice mages. Let's go ahead and take care of that. I got, for my troubles, 5 fame and a level up. My skills on level up were Dark Fire Magic and Motivation. In general, I'm not a big fan of taking Motivation. Drawing 2 more cards is useful, but it doesn't add anything to you quantitatively. You don't get any more resources. You just get the resources that you would already get faster. I'm not a big fan of taking that unless you have a particular reason to do so. So Dark Fire Magic, which does give me a quantitative benefit, namely the mana, was my preferred choice here, so I decided to grab that. Mana early on is quite useful to have in any case. Then after the combat, because I had a 6-card hand, good job remembering the tactic you chose, Boris, I decided to actually cash out Mana Pool and play Crystallize to get a crystal. You could say that maybe I shouldn't have done that and hung on to Mana Pool for something else, but I knew that what was left in my hand didn't really amount to much. I wasn't going to be able to conquer a dungeon or anything, or take out the keep or anything, so I might as well just play Mana Pool and get the Crystallize while I had the chance. So I played Mana Pool, and I used the, begging your pardon, blue die on Crystallize to get a green crystal, getting my first crystal of the game. Okay, so at this point I had 2 dice to reroll. Both of them rolled to black. So we finally had a really good source, and immediately I shot it down. That's obviously not, my intentional doing or anything, but that's what happened. For my advanced action, I decided to do the same thing that everyone should have done in the first place, which is I took Ice Bolt. This was not without a heavy heart, however, because Dodge and Weave from the Lost Legion is one of the best advanced actions in the game. It's like maybe in my top 3 of good advanced actions. So I was sad to pass it up, but Ice Bolt for the mana potential and the elemental damage just seemed like the best fit. So that was it. This slid down. The new advanced action was Counterattack, which is a decent attack card, but nothing to write home about. And let's put Ice Bolt into my hand. At this point, I drew all the remaining cards in my deck. Tranquility, the Threaten, and the Improvisation. So I didn't really have much left over at this point. Okay, so that was it. We now go back around the top. It's the 4th turn of the game. At this point, finally, Tovak went into the dungeon. And he collected for his troubles a werewolf. Now, with concentration plus swiftness, you can kill a werewolf, but even if Tovak had concentration, it wouldn't have mattered because there was no green die in the source to power it. So Tovak, like a boss, took just 4 wounds. Then he played Rage, powered by the red die for 4 attack, and Swiftness sideways to get the 5th attack that he needed to kill the werewolf. So, ouch. But, you know, he kind of had to do it. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like going all into something. You might end up being forced to do the thing that you committed so much time to, and then pay a really, really heavy price for getting what you wanted. Anyway, Tovak got some fame. Let's give him that in a moment. First, let's take a look at his skills. He got I Feel No Pain and Shield Mastery. Shield Mastery is an alright little skill, but I Feel No Pain lets you discard 1 wound per turn and draw a card to replace it. So since Tovak had gotten an ass ton of wounds, that was obviously the pick for him. He grabbed that, and that was it. Oh, that was it for his skill. He decided at this point to take Dodge and Weave, which is the absolute correct choice. That was just a really good card. The new advanced action offer was Steady Tempo, which is a movement card some people think is awesome because you get to reuse it. I don't think it's that great. I think there are many movement cards that are better than Steady Tempo. But in any case, that was the new offer. So he got that, and actually he rolled a die to determine what his reward for the dungeon would be, and he actually beat 1 3 odds to get a spell, which was pretty lucky for him, so he got to take a spell as well, and he chose Snowstorm, which was the obvious choice here. I would have rather seen Tovak get an artifact because Snowstorm is just really, really good for fighting in dungeons and tombs. It's ridiculously good at killing brown enemies and dragons. The replacement was Mana Bolt, which is also very good at fighting. So I, as Arythea, had my eye on this. It would be a very, very nice thing for me to have, or for anyone to have, for fighting in this game. Okay, so Tovak finally took out the dungeon. Let's go ahead and give him his fame. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fame for killing that werewolf, and a completed dungeon to his name. Okay, the Stone Thrower's dead. Let's get rid of that. Next up was Wolfhawk. Wolfhawk, similarly to Tovak, felt like she just needed to go into this dungeon, so she did. She went into the dungeon and she found a shadow, which is altogether not a bad monster to find, because it only deals 2 wounds, even to a level 1 character. It's the only brown enemy that only deals 2 wounds. So Wolfhawk definitely availed herself of this feature of the shadow. She took 2 more wounds to her collection, and then she killed off the shadow by playing Rage with, oh, hang on a minute, we gotta reroll the die. Tovak rerolled the red die and it stayed red, which was very convenient for Wolfhawk, who used the red die to power up Rage, which with Deadly Aim gave her attack 6. She then needed 2 more cards sideways. The cards she played sideways were Swift Reflexes, her unique card, and Improvisation for 2 more attack, killing the shadow. So she finished up her turn. She got 4 fame for her trouble, 1, 2, 3, but she didn't level up because of this mana seal. So, ouch. There was no white mana for her to break the seal with, and she figured that rather than going ahead, passing up on this dungeon, and not leveling up anyway, she would just take out the dungeon, not hit level 3, and then collect the reward for the dungeon. Unlike Tovak, Wolfhawk got an artifact. She got the majority option, or the more likely of the 2 options, and she rerolled the red die into red. So, yay, there's always red mana in the source. Hippity hopscotch. Alright, next up was Goldyx, who continued playing somewhat strangely here. He played Crystal Joy with the red die to get a red crystal. He then played Stamina and Determination to move into the glade, again taking 2 wounds from the diggers. He didn't fight them back. He flipped Potion Making to heal the 2 wounds, and then he used the glade, because he ended his turn in this magical glade, to heal the 1 wound that was in his discard pile. At the end, he actually discarded Swiftness in order to keep Crystal Joy in his hand, which is somewhat of a bold move, but since he would start his next turn with a gold token from the glade, he'd be able to play Crystal Joy again and get more mana. So he was really big on getting mana out of Crystal Joy. And the die rolled into blue, so we had 5 black dice and a blue one. Next up was me. Now, actually, we totally forgot to take my reward from the monastery. When there's so many rewards to take, it's easy to forget things. I had a choice of 2 artifacts. Okay. One of them was Shield of the Fallen Kings, and one of them was Banner of Courage. Let's move them into my hand. I, of course, I knew what was going to come up in this hand, because I was going to draw everything. So it's not a big deal that we're seeing it now. So Shield of the Fallen Kings is a new one from Lost Legion. It's a blocking artifact, and in my opinion, it's pretty bad. In most people's opinion, it's a pretty bad artifact, simply because it's not that likely that you're going to need to block this much. Most of the time, you either kill something with ranged attack, or you take wounds and heal the wounds. Like, blocking is actually kind of uncommon, and I certainly wasn't going to use it this round. So I took Banner of Courage. This allows you to reuse one of the units, specifically that you have, specifically the one that you've attached this banner to. Scouts are not the best thing to reuse with Banner of Courage, but I figured, you know, this does something for me right now, this does nothing for me right now. And that's a big strategy of mine in Mage Knight, is I try to take things that are good for me in the short term, because in Mage Knight, the short term eventually becomes the long term. An extra 2 fame here, or an extra card saved here, or an extra mana here, might cause you to get a level sooner, which makes you get a skill sooner, which makes you be able to beat this combat sooner, which just has a snowballing effect. So short-term benefits I value very highly in Mage Knight, and Banner of Courage seemed worth it to me. So I went ahead and I attached it to my scouts. Shield of the Fallen Kings got discarded. Okay, so it was back around to me. I attached the banner to my scouts at the beginning of my turn. And at this point, I needed to, you know, get over here and take a look at what was in the keep. So I did that. Let's move my stuff back here. I played the scouts. I flipped the banner. And I spent them again for a total of 4 movement and the ability to explore 2 tiles at a distance of 2. I went over to the dungeon, and then at this point I played Improvisation and Threaten and Tranquility for 4 move, and I was able to explore 2 tiles with this from a distance of 2 away, which is kind of a big deal. I think it's very easy to underestimate the ability of the scouts to do that. So the question is which tiles to pick, because there are actually 4 tiles here, and I could explore 2 of them. Well, clearly not this one next to Goldyx. This one seems pretty clearly mine, so I looked at that one. We had a Mage Tower here, and a Rampaging Orc, which was a Summoner. Which is decent. It's not too hard to kill a Summoner, and 4 fame is pretty good. Then for the other tile, I chose to explore this one, and this was probably a mistake. The reason that was probably a mistake is simply that I was not very likely to go into both of these tiles. I was probably going to go into this one and get a spell, and then keep going from there. So it really would have made more sense for me to actually explore over here, because then I could travel to the village, explore up, and maybe see what was over here. I decided not to explore this because I didn't want to give Wolfhawk a free exploration to let her see what was coming. But the thing is, by exploring here, I essentially gave Goldyx a free exploration, because he was going to obviously explore this tile at some point and move over here to see what was coming. So either I should have just not explored at all, this is my second exploration, or I should have explored over here. It was a tough decision to make, and I think I probably made the wrong one. I never ended up going into this tile at all. So anyway, that was my exploration, and since I at this point had like nothing else to do, I just played Ice Bolt to get a blue crystal, and I flipped Dark Fire Magic to get a red crystal. I could have used the red token to, you know, get extra 2 move, but that wouldn't have done really very much for me. I could have maybe moved onto this mine, which had a movement cost of 5, but I just didn't think that was worth it. I'd rather put myself in position right away to take out this dungeon, or possibly the swordsmen who were in this keep at the start of the next night. Okay, so that was it for my turn. At this point, my hand was totally empty, so I would be calling end of round at the beginning of my next turn. So everybody knew at this point they had 2 turns left. Oh my god, Tovak's hand is a mess. So anyway, he had some cards. He rested. He discarded Mana Draw and his 4 wounds. And I have no idea what else he's holding. Sorry, the deck kind of got a game away from me. I know he had Dodge and Weave, and I know he played Rage and Swiftness. He also had the Snowstorm. So anyway, that was what he did. And that was it. Wolfhawk's turn was up next. Wolfhawk, where are you? Okay, so Wolfhawk actually did not rest, even though she was holding 3 wounds. What she did was she played March, powered by the green crystal that she got from Mana Draw, the Mana Storm that I forgot to give her last time, for 4 movement. And then she actually discarded her artifact for a 5th point of movement. Her artifact was Diamond Ring. Now this is a horrific irony, because Wolfhawk desperately needed white mana to break the seal, but having gotten the artifact that gives white mana, she didn't use it, which makes a certain kind of sense. She got screwed horribly by the mana seal, There's a lot of angst going in here. I remember Josiah was pleading with us during the game. Oh, let me have some white mana. I'll break the seal, I promise. But none of us were having any of it. And so since he got screwed by it, he figured, let's let, Goldyx get screwed and, Tovak and Arythea get screwed as well. Somebody's going to have to pony up this white mana, and he didn't want it to be him. So I think he made a smart call here, discarding the Diamond Ring to make it to the Glade. So by doing so, he was able to heal one of these wounds. And Wolfhawk at this point ended her turn. Next up was Goldyx. Goldyx, who'd been holding on to Crystal Joy for the entire round, played Crystal Joy, powered by the blue die that he had rolled last turn and that none of us had been able to use, to get a crystal of his choice. He elected to get a white crystal, increasing the variety of his crystal counts. And then he fought the diggers, actually. And he took 2 wounds, and then played Rage, powered by his gold token from the Glade for 4 attack to kill the diggers. So he finally took out the diggers, and I took, I think, 6 wounds from these things? That's probably the most wounds that diggers have dealt in the entire history of Mage Knight. And at the end of his turn, Pawel was able to heal one of the wounds from the Glade. And since he did not break the mana seal, he just took only 1 fame from killing those diggers and 1 reputation. So that was it for Goldyx's turn. And he discarded his other wound then to keep Crystal Joy in his hand. So he ended up not holding on to any wounds, but there were, there was some woundage left in his deck. Note that he's still holding on to Learning here, which he had taken for his level up. Okay, that was it for Goldyx's turn. My turn, I was empty, so I called end of round. Everybody had 1 turn left. Tovak's last turn involved a flurry of activity. He played Swiftness and Rage and Cold Toughness for and Snowstorm. The latter 3 of these all sideways for 5 movement, allowing him to go to the Village in the Swamp, which didn't require any damage because Goldyx had taken out the diggers for him. Then he just ended his turn there. Wolfhawk played Tranquility to heal up one of her wounds. She then paid a gold mana from the Glade to break the white seal on the map, allowing everybody to level up. So by delaying this, she ended up costing Goldyx a fame and the ability to be level 3, which means, taking less damage or taking fewer wounds. So I don't know if that was the right move to break the mana seal or not, but as she was near a dungeon and near an unexplored tile, I guess it made sense for her to actually have the seal broken so she'd be ready to take things on. Ending her turn in the Glade meant that she actually got to heal up this other wound as well, so she ended up ending the round wound-free, which is good for her. Goldyx, at this point, ran into a little bit of bad luck. He played March to explore to the east, and he found what is probably the worst tile in the game. This tile, the second worst tile in the game. There's a tile that's even worse than this. Basically, all this has is a rampaging orc, which is an ironclad, which is a tough enemy to kill, though it's worth a lot of fame, and a village and nothing else. I mean, there's a glade here, but this is really, really bad for him because at night, forests cost 5 movement points, so he was actually going to be very hard-pressed to, get through here and get into position to actually achieve more stuff. After this, it was time for him to finally use his learning to good effect. So here's what he did, and this is actually a very strong play. He played Improvisation, powered up by one of his red crystals, discarding Crystal Joy, finally, for... Oh, I never re-rolled this die from his last turn. It actually ended up being black, which was very fitting for how the things were going here. So we ended up with 6 black dice in the source. He discarded Crystal Joy, finally, now that it couldn't be used anymore, for 5 influence. He also played Learning for 2 influence, and Promise for 2 more influence. So he had a bunch of influence here that he was actually able to use to recruit the magic familiars from the Glade. Magic familiars, in addition to being grotesquely overpowered, can be recruited from glades to make them even better. So that was really, really strong because this is pretty much the strongest silver unit. And Goldyx here had plenty of crystals to feed them after each round. What was really cool about him, though, is that he actually used his gold token from starting the turn on the Glade to use as a white crystal on the familiars, which allowed them to be spent for a total of 3 + 2, which is 5 influence. And he did that By doing this, he was able to add more influence to learning and purchase an advanced action from the offer. Now, the offer at this point was this, and what he chose here was ambush. This was, I think, the right choice for sure, because again, it gives movement, it gives attack and or block. So I think that's stronger than the other two cards, which are kind of mediocre. Replacing that was regeneration, which is an amazing, amazing card. It's one of my favorite cards. Lets you reuse your units, and it provides healing. It's really, really strong. As long as you have pretty much any units, it's really, really good. So that was good to look forward to. And of course, ending his turn in a glade meant that he healed up one of the wounds that he had discarded previously. And that was the end of the round. So let's survey the situation and see how things are going. First of all, fame-wise, I mean, it's a toss-up. We're all pretty much at the same place. But Wolfhawk generously did break the white seal, so we're all ready to level up to level 4. My standing is probably the best from a positional standpoint. I am on a dungeon that I can get. I am near this tower, which at night deserts only cost 3 movement, so I can try to get a spell. There's a a mana bolt in the spell offer that's very, very good. I can get this keep if I want to. The problem with the keep is it's not next to anything good. Generally, keeps are not worth the resources if you cannot spend a bunch of time around them. There is this maze, but I don't really want to go to this maze because it's pretty out of position. I want to be able to keep going upward and exploring. As like I said before, I'm a big fan of doing this. I like to travel up so that I can maybe get objectives that aren't as good as my opponents, but then I'm in position later on to explore better and better things. Goldyx probably had the most impressive round because he took out an altar and a green enemy. He got the best unit in the game available at this point, the familiars, and he managed to heal up most of his recruits. He also has a ton of crystals. Goldyx's disadvantage, though, is that he's in terrible position here with nothing but 5 movement terrain around him and this annoying thing to kill. A good tip for new players is generally, apart from the orc that you kill sometimes in the beginning of the game to reach level 2, orcs are not a good thing to spend resources on. The reputation bonus is not that good, and it's just empty fame. You're not getting any like spells or artifacts or advanced actions or anything with it. It's just a waste of your resources. So he's in a really tough spot here. Tovak was probably in the worst position because all he did was take out a single dungeon. He didn't achieve anything else. And he's here, which is better position than Goldyx, but it's still farther back on the map than either Wolfhawk or Arythea. Wolfhawk took an extra wound she didn't need to take, but she ended up healing up all of her wounds. She's in decent position. She can explore here. There's a tower here if she wants to kind of backtrack a bit to get it, and the dungeon right here for her to grab. So she's actually in decent position. Her main issue is that she didn't get any units. She did get one of the best skills in the game, Deadly Aim, but no units. And she's not in position to get any units, so she might have a tough time taking out the dungeon, especially because the advanced action she chose was Mana Storm, which doesn't directly help with killing things. And so it's, anyone's game, although Tovak is probably the person who is in last place at this point. Alright folks, thanks for watching this video. If you did, please like and or subscribe to my channel if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're watching on BoardGameGeek, please give this a thumb up. I'd appreciate your support. Let me know in the comments if you have any feedback, and otherwise stay tuned. Round 2 is going to be coming up shortly. Take care, everybody.